Good afternoon, Guyana, and thank you once again for joining us for the 4 o'clock edition of Government in Transition. My name is Hugh Todd, and today we have uh, Bishop Juan Edghill, who is a former Minister of Government, former MP, and a national candidate for the People's Progressive Party Civic. Alongside him is Mr. Sanjeev Datadin, attorney at law and national candidate, People's Progressive Party Civic. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for this segment of Government in Transition.
Well, good afternoon, you and Sanjeev. It's always a pleasure to share a program with you. Good afternoon to all your viewers.
Good afternoon to all your viewers and listeners. You, good afternoon to you as well. And Bishop, it's always my pleasure.
Gentlemen, I want us to begin with an analysis of Lowenfield, the character, the man that the spotlight has been on for the past several weeks. He has emerged as, some would call it, as a person who is actually stymieing the process that is affecting the declaration. What do you make of the man himself, the character, that man Lowenfield, based on how he's been operating over the last several weeks? Bishop, go ahead, please.
Well, I've been consistent in highlighting to this nation that part of the problem that we face today is the man Keith Lowenfield. Since Mingo went rogue with those fictitious numbers, Lowenfield, if he was not a part of the plot to rig these elections, would have brought out the statements of poll in his possession and the matter would have been corrected. Mingo was appointed by Lowenfield, like all the other returning officers. So Lowenfield is a rogue. He is devious. He is a man who should not be anywhere near authority, supervision, or anywhere near public office, much less being in a statutory officer. He is clearly partisan. He's like playing a game where he's supposed to be a referee, but he's part of the opposing team. It is clear that Lowenfield is aided and abetted by the APNU-AFC. He's participating in discussions with them. The criminal rigging plot, he's vitally a part of it, because it is strange that everything that Lowenfield has done or has attempted to do is to ensure that the APNU-AFC win these elections when the numbers have indicated they have lost these elections. One, by assisting Mingo twice in that fraudulent declaration. Then he of himself putting in two different reports that want to disenfranchise 275,000 plus, then 115,000 plus. We have a ruling from the CCJ. He now needs clarification by way of... He got the ruling from the Court of Appeal. He was over to present a report to show that the APNU-AFC won, which was part of the rigging plot. So Lowenfield is a character that I believe his actions voluntarily terminated his services as Chief Elections Officer of GCOM. That is my point of view. He has voluntarily terminated his services. He has said to the nation, I'm no longer fit to be in this office. I no longer want to be in this office. I'm no longer eligible to be in this office. I've broken my oath that I've taken to perform my duties in a particular way, and I don't care anything else. This man is holding this country ransom, and I believe that the Madam Chairman and the commissioners must deal with him condemningly. I believe that now is the time for that. He's a rogue.
Sanjeev, your assessment of his character and his behavior.
There could be nothing else other than he is unfit to hold public office. He has demonstrated the kind of absence of shame and the deficit in character that we should never, ever be forced to endure as a nation. How could you produce report after report. And then those numbers are different. You have no shame of how stupid you look by doing that. And then you come and you produce a letter where you are trying to demonstrate that you're clever, as if you were a child. What is the purpose? The whole world knows by now what are the results of the recount of the votes. So all you are doing, it's a delay tactic. It's the use of your administrative authority to delay the job that which you must do. That, by definition, is misfeasance in public office, which is a criminal offense. And I do believe that he has been charged with said offense. But what did he write in his letter? You see, that's what happens the entire process. Childish attempts are being made to be clever. No one cares just how many words you want to play with. You have to do a job. Now, he doesn't understand, he says, whether the request is pursuant by the chairwoman, is pursuant to section 18, which, for the record, states...
I want us to delve into the letter itself, the content of the letter that was written by the chair. So I don't want to go into that yet. Just to introduce his character to the people.
Well, this is what it is. When you have no shame, when you are unconcerned about what you took an oath to do, then what you will do will have no consistency or logic to it because you're unconcerned. And I know that the die-hard supporters of the coalition are going to say that he's doing a good thing. But they must remember at all times, when the rule of law is eroded in a country, it is not directional in its effect. It is universal in its effect. So when you condone a public officer who is a coward and does not want to face the responsibilities for which the taxpayers pay him for, and you condone that, all you do is you encourage that officer to continue to operate in said light. All that will do is will put him in conflict with the ability to complete his job. And as Bishop says, he's voluntarily resigning. Yeah. Because that's what he's doing. He is putting himself in a position where dismissal will be the only course available if he wouldn't do the job. If you look at the letter is written by a child for which quite possibly English is a foreign language, because clearly it is written by a confused, circuitous route to appear to be as if it were pointing out deficiencies in the request. There were no deficiencies in the request.
Okay, thanks for that, Sanjeev and Bishop. Let us go to the contents of the letter that was written by the JCOM chair, Lowenfield, instructing him to use the tabulation from the recount process to deliver to the commission, which should have been at 2 p.m. today. Sanjeev, beginning with you as an attorney at law, how would you assess the letter that was written by the GCOM chair to the CEO and his response to that?
Well, Mr. Lowenfield has two problems with his response. The first response he has is his response is contemptuous of what the Caribbean Court of Justice made in its orders. The Caribbean Court of Justice was very clear. Now, you will hear persons saying that there could be no difficulty if what he was there is no specific order against him. But what we have very clearly is we have a situation where the court outlined a procedure. If you are adopting an approach which is designed to frustrate the objects of an order of court, then you have a problem. And his letter clearly says so. He said, firstly, the thing he says is he's considered and interpreted what the ruling is. He's not qualified to do that. But be that as it may, if he wants to do that. Then he says that he can't carry out all of the functions in Order 60. But the court said specifically what functions he should carry out and what functions were inconsistent with the Constitution and the Representation of the People's Act he could not carry out. But he goes on and quite rudely says he would like to know whether the request is being made to him pursuant to Section 18 of the Election Laws Amendment Act or is being made pursuant to Article 177 of the Constitution. It would be wise for him to recognize that it matters not which section of the Act or the Constitution the request is being made. His obligation is to fulfill a request. Now, just for clarity, Section 18 says that the Chief Elections Officer is at all times subject to the control and direction of GCOM. That's what Section 18 says. And Article 177 says that he has to offer his advice to the chairman for her to make the declaration. The Caribbean Court of Justice went into detail as to what that advice can constitute. A tabulation, which the chairwoman in her letter was very explicit about. Now, let us juxtapose that position against when the Court of Appeal of Guyana made a ruling and said it meant valid votes, stayed the order for 3 days. He was quite willing to breach that order and hurry and put in. So he clearly understood everything then. He received guidance from a decision that offered none. And now he has a decision that he wants to. That is insubordination. It is obvious that the tone of the letter is one whereby trying to find a reason not to do his job and to pretend that the reason he's not doing his job is because he doesn't understand what he has to do. Well, Hugh, if he doesn't understand what he has to do, then he should not be there. Quite simple. You know?
Thank you for that.
Good afternoon, Vindhya.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
We'd like to welcome Dr. Vindhya Persaud, who is a PPP executive and national candidate. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
We're just going through Lowenfield's character. Do you wish to give your view on the character of that man called Lowenfield, given his actions over the last several weeks in this process, and knowing fully that his duty is heavily is part and parcel of moving this process forward. What is your take on his character as a functionary of the GCOM?
I have to agree with Sanjeev and say that it is quite selective in terms of his behavior when it comes to report, because previously he did not seek the clarity and guidance which he's requesting at the moment when the Caribbean Court of Justice and the subsequent letter by the chair of GCOM, they were not ambiguous. They were very clear and precise, and all of Guyana, in fact, the rest of the world understood what it meant. And we've gone through months of angst where people are frustrated, they're stressed, and we are just asking someone to fulfill his mandate, present a report so a declaration can be made. And in fact, I feel as if he is continuing in a dogged approach to subvert democracy, and in such a manner as to prevent the legalities from taking place. So I think it does not do him any good in terms of his character, the manner in which he's behaving. We have seen a plethora of persons who are saying quite clearly, bring this process to an end, bring it to a conclusion that is legal, that stands in alignment with the Constitution. The recent call by the Secretary General of the United Nations follows a long list of personalities, both locally and internationally, they, having recognized the validity of the recount, the wishes of the population, and the wishes of the population should be of paramount importance. That is the purpose of an elections. And when he seeks to subvert the will of the people, then he cannot be someone who possesses the kind of character that we want to hold that office which he holds. And I feel by continuing to do this, he cannot be a patriot of this country. He cannot be someone who wants the best for Guyana, who would like to see progress, who would like to see forward movement, because I think in his manner, he's willfully doing what he continues to do. And I hope that something allows him to fulfill his mandate in the best way possible. And that would be the chair maybe taking the kind of decision that she needs to take. Maybe that's me speaking very forcefully, but I think something needs to happen to bring this process to an end, because we cannot as a country continue to temper our patience. And I must congratulate the entire country for their patience, for their forbearance, because amidst what we're going through in terms of COVID-19, amidst the economic hardships, people are sitting very much compelled by the unfolding of events that would have commenced post-voting on the 2nd of March. Now, 4 months, that's not a short time. That's a quarter of a year. When we are losing everything in our productive sectors, we are losing so much in terms of what our country could have achieved in this time. And it seems as if Mr. Lowenfield continues to be bent on a manner of behavior that is disturbing and should be disturbing to every right-minded person who is looking at what's happening.
Thank you very much for that, Vindhya. Last evening, the Attorney General issued a missive where he was basically saying that the Chief Elections Officer does not have to carry out the wishes of the chair. And we've seen what Lowenfield would have done today. I'm wondering to what extent Congress Place is still interfering with the seamless process within GCOM, given the reaction of Lowenfield today. Your views, Bishop?
Well, I don't think it is left for anybody to speculate. It is transparent. The Attorney General does not represent GCOM, neither is he the lawyer for GCOM. GCOM is not a part of the executive. The Attorney General is part of the executive and represents the executive. And here you have the Attorney General giving advice to an officer of a constitutional body to deliberately disobey the instructions of that constitutional body because it facilitates the party to get a victory from which he's from. So it is clear. Now listen, Lowenfield is not an idiot, even though he's behaving like one. Lowenfield is a lieutenant colonel retired. He understands command and structure. He understands fully well you comply and then complain. Lowenfield's actions is not in keeping with his training, his professional conduct of 2015 and before, and his army life. Lowenfield's conduct represents political handling and political control. Lowenfield is being handled by Basil Williams, Vincent Alexander, the Congress Place cabal, and the other rigging group that prefers to stay silent because you're not hearing anything from people like Robert Corbin and so on, but it doesn't mean that they don't exist. Remember, Lowenfield put in a report to the chairman, which included Mingo's fictitious numbers speedily, even while a court challenge was taking place at the High Court about Mingo's conduct. He hurriedly put in a report. Good. Lowenfield again, after the chairman wrote him and says, I need a final report on the recount, he was available for marshals to serve him in his office to prevent him putting in that report. Then he became available immediately after the Court of Appeal made a ruling, which as we now know, it is pure politics and not law, he was able in a matter of hours to put in a report to show that the PNC led APNU-AFC won the elections by invalidating 115,000 votes. We had the CCJ. He didn't appear or put in an appearance, even though he was a named party at the CCJ. He didn't appear. He didn't put a to represent him to make his case. But he is now willing to go all around the place, dancing to his political masters to facilitate, because if you look at his letter is up the door for further civil action, because he wants to buy declarations of the 10 returning officers. And by that he is saying, as the chief elections officer, you know those 10 people who signed those certificates at the recount, they were not statutory officers, they were not sworn and gazetted like the 10 returning officers, including Mingo. And under the representation of the People's Act, I'm supposed to tabulate and to return officers. And apparently his reading in the CCJ is chiding of his illegal, unconstitutional, unlawful actions about his 115,000 that he was trying to invalidate. He's trying to say, well, I can't really use the recount numbers anymore. I need guidance. He wants to reopen the door to that Vincent Alexander plot of holding the 10 declarations that were made at first in abeyance. That is a Congress place plot. And Lowenfield is being politically handled, and he's not following his statutory oath. And this is where we are in a quagmire. So I hope the GCOM meeting, which I believe is still going on, makes a decision of how they will deal with the Lowenfields of this world. Lowenfield collected the poll books. Lowenfield collected all the documents from all the various returning officers. And during the recount, to facilitate the PNC's narrative, he refused to make them available to the recount. So the PNC could go under the tent and say, we didn't find poll book, we didn't find statutory documents, but all those presiding officers turned those documents into DROs and ROs who went to Rocks and Myers and Lowenfield. We must not forget that. So the man is acting like if he's professional, but he's always leaving a hole for the to come with their wickedness. And his letter today is carefully crafted, like Sanjeev says, in a childish manner. But the real loophole there is to get another citizen to come and challenge. You know, they recount them 10 certificates that were signed. They were not signed by statutory, and we need guidance on which numbers Lowenfield should use. Should it be with the 10 statutory officers, which include Mingo, with this bingo lingo numbers, or what the whole world saw in a transparent process of a recount? So he's trying to confuse the issues, but to give Congress place another opportunity to delay and to create false hope in the minds of their supporters. But you, the CCJ, left no stone unturned. And I dare any judge, and I'm not threatening, I'm just saying, I dare any local judge to facilitate that kind of a behavior, because it's going to end up all the way back to the CCJ. Even if they get another political ruling at the Court of Appeal, we will have people who deal with law and the Constitution to bring Guyana back to the straight and narrow path of democracy. And the rulings of the CCJ left no stone unturned. Lowenfield, if he could read, should be able to understand exactly what he needs to do. And the letter that the chairman wrote him didn't leave any doubt in his mind which numbers he's supposed to use. They recount. But you see, that is the PNC's problem. They can't handle them recount numbers. Why? It confirms that the PPPC won the election on March 2nd. Secondly, it confirms that Mingo was trying to declare numbers to put them in office. Number three, it also proves that the narrative that they were creating, that they won these elections, has no substance in fact. And number four, it is clear that they have infiltrated the elections machinery and they have people who are working on their behalf, and that must be able to come to an end. The political handling of people in GCOM is clear. It's a transparent operation where the world is seeing. They're dancing to the music of Congress Place. And David Granger cannot claim innocence in this anymore. He is a part of the plot, spearheading it, and the chief beneficiary from such wickedness. And the last thing I want to say on this, that shows how much they got to hide. This desperation, it's only a matter of time the Guyanese people would really understand what these people did for the 5 years that they were there. That's why they're fighting so hard not to come out. They got a whole lot to hide, but it will be exposed.
Thank you for that. Sanjeev, your thoughts on the extent of the collusion between the office of the CEO, GCOM, and Congress Place, based on all of what you've seen recently. And then I'll go to you, Vindhya.
There are a couple of things that are very troubling. That if you look at it from a little bit of ways off, you recognize what it is. Now, Mingo was tasked with doing something. He had to use those numbers. When he was using those numbers in Ashman's building, he was using a spreadsheet. It may be something, it may be not. But when he was using a spreadsheet, the APNU representatives in the room also had a spreadsheet when everybody else had statement of polls. It's quite an odd thing. But then you have to take it to the steps where it was. It was clear that there was a deliberate effort in that Hatfield Street office to stop the counting that was going on with the SOPs being displayed. And Mingo feigned illness, or he may have been ill, whatever it was, everything was used to delay so that whatever was planned could be executed. Then Mingo came and he did this false, fraudulent declaration, which everyone knew. The court stopped it. The court said, you didn't obey the law. You need to go back. While he went back, it was clear there were operatives from APNU there. There was Valda Lawrence. There was Mr. Williams was there some of the time. Various persons were coming. But Ms. Valda Lawrence was there for quite a while all of this was going on. She signed the first declaration to authenticate it. Then the second declaration came, signed again by another APNU candidate. And those numbers were different from the first numbers to begin with. And they were done in a manner that was identical. There was no display of the statement of polls in the process. We then went to a recount. We were shown very clearly that what was being done by Mingo was fraudulent. But bear in mind, while the court case was going on to stop Mingo's fraudulent declaration from taking effect, Lowenfield quickly steps into the breach and produces his report. So all that was really required is GCOM needed to say, this is the declaration. Now, there would have been, from what I understand, enormous pressure on that position taking place. But it is the chairwoman who did not buckle to that pressure. Now, what happened was a recount. When the recount happened, there were enormous issues of the identical nature going on. That we should discard people's votes, that we had this list of all these dead and migrant voters. They wanted all of those things. And then what surfaced was we should do it over. Now, you know when they want a do-over. It's like a child. You had a chance, you didn't succeed, you lost the game, you want a do-over. So it's essentially double or nothing. That's what adults would do. But that's a game that they want. But the rhetoric is strong from Congress Place that what we should do is we should do it over. We didn't get the results, so 2 best in 3 perhaps, or 3 best in 5 when that happens. But they don't want a declaration. They want to remain in power when that is done. But then you look at what transpired following that. Following the part where Mingo was removed out of the process, because there was no way he could have continued. Lowenfield was quick to take the recount, take the numbers, throw away 115,000 of my countrymen's vote. And APNU said nothing. Not a word. They said he made a declaration and we should go on with it. Not a word was said about 115,000 of their countrymen. So they must have known it was happening. And I don't believe that there are coincidences like that, Hugh, because this morning, lo and behold, Mr. Basil Williams, who, for better or for worse, is the Attorney General, and whose competence and abilities are on display quite frequently on television and in the court. But he came up supposedly with this grand plan that Lowenfield doesn't need to obey any orders. And the orders are not very clear. And lo and behold, he turns up with a letter to say that your orders are not very clear and tell me what to do. Now, if you notice, all of the government side, all of the coalition persons are not really in an agitated mode, and they're not really concerned. They knew what would have happened. We were the ones waiting with bated breath to see what would happen at 2 o'clock. I believe there is collusion. I believe the collusion started day one, a long time ago, with putting the staff into GCOM, that they felt they can do what they wanted. I believe that that sort of collusion is required because to do the dastardly acts that you have to do, to break the law with such impunity in the face of obvious fraud and falsity, the only way it happens is if there's a herd mentality. It has to be a whole group of people saying, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is what you do. This is what we're going to do. You create the indoctrination, if you like, akin to what is used elsewhere for very, very hostile things, such as suicide bombers. But the indoctrination concept is the same. The herd mentality is created. But Mr. Lowenfield should be well aware that my understanding of the proceedings that are in the court, there's only space in the dock for him. He's not going to be able to have the persons that surround him and encourage him to do these things. Now, it is unfortunate that the transition of power is being thwarted and interrupted. All the while we have a global pandemic. All the while we have people struggling on a daily basis. But clearly the coalition government is unconcerned about this. You don't see them saying anything about this.
Yes,
you look at their bloggers, you look at their social media posts, they're only concerned about one thing: how many problems they had with this election, of which they have no proof. But they keep saying it. I guess it gives them some level of comfort to say it, but they produce no proof. And they basically want, notwithstanding all of that and all of the problems with the election, Harman says that Granger should be sworn in. So never mind all the illegalities that he complains of, still just swear us in, while all these illegalities that they complain of, and disregard the obvious, clear, transparent numbers that have been produced by the recount. And that's in fact what the CCJ said. The CCJ said that GCOM, it is GCOM's duty to ensure The CEO complies with the letter of 16 June written to Lowenfield. And that letter was, please give me your report in accordance with the recount data.
Thank you, Sanjeev.
So hopefully.
Okay, Vindhya, your assessment of the extent of collusion between the Congress Place and the office of the CEO of GCOM?
I think the belligerence with which Lowenfield and before him Mingo would have acted, they feel that they're in some way shielded by the narrative that is emanating from Congress Place and also key persons from within APNU-AFC, notably the Attorney General, if he is, and Mr. Harmon in particular. And what was very disturbing is a group of supporters went to meet with President David Granger, and he said to them, and this was just after the CCJ judgment decision, that the door is not closed. And, you know, it was like a red flag. And I thought to myself, here again, we are going to see something else in play. And it followed true to form when after that, we saw the response of Lowenfield. And I think Sanjeev gave a detailed narrative, a detailed explanation of the events as they transpired. And we are seeing over and over the nudges or sometimes the overt movement of members of APNU-AFC. And then we see faithfully the compliance of these things by, in one case, Mingo and Lowenfield. But I think they need to understand this cannot be an indefinite play. What we're doing is having billions of dollars, we already spent billions, being spent to just do what? To pull wool over whose eyes? Because I think the international community has been clear. People in Guyana are clear. The recount numbers are known by all those who are part of the process. And to try to continue in this manner, to delay, to derail, is not helping anyone. In fact, they continue to act against the laws, to act against the Constitution, to act against their very office. And the only way in which I think those officers could have acted in that manner is if they feel beyond doubt that somehow or the other they are protected by these APNU-AFC people. And I agree with Sanjeev. This whole debacle started a while ago when people were placed at GCOM and we saw the criteria which was used to place people in key positions at GCOM. And I think it had to go back to their loyalty, a lot of those key personnel. And now we are seeing why this was so, because this was a plot that had started a long time ago. And I don't want to repeat what Sanjeev has said, but more and more we are seeing the adherence to all of the instructions coming out of Congress Place. And no one can claim innocence. If there is decency, if there is dignity, if there is statesmanship, I think the president should have ceded. I think like every other developed part of this world, every other civilized part of this world, many people who are in elections, once they have an inkling, sometimes there's not even a formal declaration as such, they know and they will resign. And this is the kind of civility, decency, and honor we would like to see. Why do you want to hold on to power which does not belong to you? And at what cost?
Yes.
The thing is, at what cost? How long will you keep the people in our country in a stranglehold where they're struggling to eke out a living, where they're trying every day to see the end of the tunnel? I don't think it's fair to the people of Guyana. And if the APNU and AFC cabal feel that they're in any way endearing themselves to the people of Guyana because they want to wrest power in the manner in which they do, they're not. I think what they're doing is that they're plunging themselves in an abyss of no return, because if people are on the midline, this kind of behavior that they're portraying, where even some of the more midline of their flock, we've seen some people from their ranks break ranks and say clearly, you've lost elections, concede. And to want to use people in very important offices like GCOM, where it gives the people of the country a chance to voice their will, to reflect what they want to see, who they want to be in government, to wrest that from people by this kind of irrational, irresponsible, dishonest, and deceitful kind of behavior is reprehensible. And I don't think it should be excused. I really don't think so. And I think for Mr. Basil Williams to continue to peddle the kind of, I would say, overt incitement of Lowenfield to act in defiance of a decision, and also to act in defiance of the chair, is ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Thank you, Vindhya. I think the Guyanese public, as well as the international community, I think they're aware that there is some amount of political protection for Lowenfield for him to behave in such a manner, and it's very disturbing. It's unfortunate, but that is the reality, and we have to push forward to ensure that democracy prevails. Gentlemen, lady, we have time for one more round of discussion. I want to look ahead. The meeting was convened at 2 p.m. We know what happened. Lowenfield is asking for some further guidance, and we're not aware of what stage it's at the moment. But I am almost certain that all of Guyana was expecting a declaration today. We know that all of the commissioners were present, along with the chair and Lowenfield himself. If Lowenfield persists with his non-compliance, how do we move forward? Are we going to, is Guyana patient enough to wait until Lowenfield redeems himself, until he sees the light, the truth, and the way, and to bring himself around to accept that he has to do his job, a job that he's being paid for by the people, taxpayers of this country? Moving forward, how do we move forward? Because clearly we're in some kind of a fix here. One man holding up an entire country. Vindhya, I'll begin with you and I'll end with Bishop.
Well, I think he's holding the country to ransom. And long after this, we need to look at the Constitution and what is allowed by such officers. We also need to look at, I know I'm not addressing right now, but going forward, we need to look at what is the criteria that is going to be used to put people in such key positions and how much they're allowed to impede a process or to allow it to go forward. Because I think when you repose that much power in one person, that can shortchange an entire population and hold the country to where it is at the moment in a desperate bid for the retaining of power by the APNU-AFC, it is very, very concerning, because it means then that you keep putting the population at this kind of ransom every time an elections will come around. But I think this is an impasse. I know the meeting was ongoing. I do believe it has concluded. What came out of the meeting, we are not privy to because we are here. But I believe the discussion should be forthcoming on the way in terms of what happens with the report. Will the chair proceed with the other commissioners to impose anything on him so he has to produce the report, which has not already been, imposed on him already? Will there be some movement to the courts again? Will there be some way in which the report can be discarded, seeing that we already know the count? So there are many ways in which we can go. And I think that comes down essentially, one, to the guidance given to the commissioners, to the legal fraternity coming up with some recourse into what we should do. But I think to continue along this way, we will have this sort of dance where 1 minute you are about to have a declaration and another minute it blows up in the air because one man feels that he could, under guidance, under propelling from the political forces out of Congress place, continue to hold us to this moment where we're not sure what we're going to do. That's just out and out ridiculous. So I believe that there are perhaps many options, legal and otherwise, and it remains to be seen what the commissioners conferred and came up with along with the chair. Will she, again, I keep saying, will she have authority? Will she act in an authoritative, decisive manner and insist that he must produce the report, because as we keep reiterating in this program and on many different platforms, all the time it is being referred to as a report dealing with the recount. And for him to talk about this whole thing with returning officers and finding all these kinds of loopholes and interpretations to try to delay the inevitable, I think it is really, really continuing to put our country in a precarious position. And when you consider that there is the potential for sanctions, you know, it's really not taking into account the impact sanctions can have on the wider country in every possible field. So I think he must, my personal view is, I think he must be held accountable. He cannot be allowed to just do what he wants, get away with it, and nothing happens. Because we will be on this kind of, you know, in parlance, as we say, hold me, loose me kind of arrangement. That is not fair to anyone. It's not fair to anyone, least of all the Guyanese population. We all, whether you're a politician or not, we all exercised our franchise. We did so based on our desire to have our country move in one way or another, whether how you voted. I don't feel anyone has the right, anyone needs to have their rights to be taken away, to be disenfranchised. The whole point of elections is to ensure that people have what they want happen. And to remove that by the willy-nilly removal of thousands of voters by his magic, and prior to him, Mingo's magic, is unheard of. I don't think our situation could be compared to any other in the world. Someone was telling me our election should probably go into the Guinness Book of World Records because of the things that have transpired. It has forced the legal community to really delve deeply into our constitution and really have a look at it from so many different angles and vantage points. But I think we are fortunate that we did have the CCJ. They did act in a prompt way. They did give a directive. And I think if we consider ourselves law-abiding citizens, and I hope Lowenfield considers himself one of those, then he should adhere. And he holds an important position. And I ask myself, is he thinking of the legacy that he's leaving?
No, he isn't.
He's clearly not. So there are lots of things happening. And I am, like everyone else, unlike the people in Congress Place, I don't know what the next step is, because our people are not directing anybody in GCOM. We, like the rest of the population, we are waiting for the right thing to happen. So I would like to know too what transpired in the meeting and what conclusion they came to, and hope that we can have a speedy resolve to this process.
Sanjeev, you're taking it.
I was desperately trying to find, I know I had read it somewhere, and I was desperately trying to find the appropriate part. And I just want to give you a little bit about this. Lowenfield in his letter essentially said that he needed guidance about how Section 96.1 of the Representation of the People Act would have and would be effectuated. And he wanted also to know whether Section 18 or 177 of the Constitution was being used to order him. Now, like all things, as Bishop said, the CCJ left no stone unturned. And that paragraph 39 of the judgment, it expressly states, Order 60 was carefully set out how the process should unfold. The result of each recount of each ballot was to be recorded in a statement of recount signed by the representatives of each contesting party. It goes on about the tabulation and what should happen, and then it goes on. The ascertained and verified matrix was to be signed by the district coordinator of the district. The signed matrix was to be transmitted to the CEO, whose responsibility was to tabulate those matrices for the 10 regions and present it in a report, in a summary observation report to GCOM. GCOM was then to deliberate on the report and then determine whether it will use it or not. That's what was perceived by 60. The court goes on to, of course, say that that's not what he did. that what he did is he took it upon himself and he took an invitation from the Court of Appeal to seemingly arbitrarily discard votes. So the answers that he wished, for the purpose of those of your viewers and your listeners, the answer lies in paragraph 39. And if perhaps Mr. Lowenfield is listening, he could look at paragraph 39 and it will answer all his questions. Now, the other thing is that the meeting that GCOM had this afternoon, it was a little, just when we had just started, I saw a clip on social media that he had left the meeting and he has an entourage of security, which is quite odd. Why would you need it, firstly? But secondly, clearly there is collusion somewhere along that should not happen. That's the first thing. I also understand that the meeting, GCOM is going to meet again tomorrow morning at some point in time. So that might be where we're headed. But in closing, I would say to you, Hugh, this is ridiculous. We should not, as a nation, tolerate this any longer. Yesterday's meeting was put off because 3 grown men want hard copies of a decision. Hugh, if they had called me, I would have printed copies and sent it to them. But they didn't even ask anybody else to do it. They turned up at the meeting entirely unprepared, oblivious to what's going on in the country, to simply say, well, oh, we would like for you to give us printed copies. And they want to see copies with the signature of the judges. Now, let me tell you, that doesn't exist. That is childish and that is nonsensical. The CCJ does not deliver decisions where the signatures of the judges are on it. They have a protocol about electronic signatures. They have a protocol about their website. They post it on the website. You could take it to be gospel. You don't need to do the rest of it. There are rules about this. But it just shows you how childish they will be. Well, oh, we won't take that one because it's not signed. None are ever signed. Mr. Alexander keeps spouting these nonsensical theories that sound logical to the uneducated or the uninformed. But it must stop. If he can't find a printer, then do like everybody else and learn to read it on a screen. Simple. Don't take public money and funds to do a job and be so pathetic and incompetent that you make yourself the laughing stock. You make your nation appear, we look to be the most primitive type. I am amazed we have fire in this country, literally, because the stupidity which they exude when they continuously say these things and expect an entire nation to believe it.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Bishop, in closing.
It is clear that the old PNC and the new PNC believes in one thing. You don't be in power and lose power. You don't be in power and lose power. So they went to these elections with a belief we are staying in power at all costs. So first, let's rig it if we have to rig it. And so they got Mingo. They were practically pushed into the recount because of the international pressure, the local pressure, the activism of the PPPC. They went to the recount, let's destroy the recount. So let's get this thing annulled. We want new elections, because if we can't have it, nobody else could have it. But the only thing they weren't telling people, if you go to new elections, the president remains until that next election. So that's one way of them staying into power. Yeah. Then we had those who teased out, and they have since disappeared, about power sharing. Inclusive governance and power sharing, the Lincoln Lewises and the David Hines and so on. That didn't find traction because it was clear you went into the game with a set of rules, and let's get the declaration, and then let us talk about inclusive governance. Now you notice what is their mantra. They got some minion, part of their lunatic fringe, who used to be associated with the PVPC in Linden, Kevin Lorimer. to talk about state of emergency. So I believe their next step is they want to create a crisis so that the president could declare a state of emergency, so as one way of holding on desperately to power. So when you talk about the way forward, we in the PPPC and all the democratic forces from the small parties, the NGOs, the various groups that I've spoken out, need to make it very, very clear to President Granger and his rigging cabal, your state of emergency plan will not come to pass because we will not tolerate it. We are a democracy. We are on a path towards a declaration of a lawfully, constitutionally, democratically elected government, and we will not allow your lust for power to stop that process. So those voices need to become very, very loud. And the types of the Lorimers and the James Bonds and all those who started commenting, let's get the state of emergency, Mr. President, let's get the state of emergency, to lull the PNC supporters into some comfort zone at all costs. They will stay into power. Well, we got to serve notice on them. We will not allow this to happen. This vulgarity, this lawlessness, this infantile politics, this stupidity that is taking place, or you might want to call it downright nonsense, lacking in sense or in reason, that they're being able to coerce people who are supposed to be intelligent enough and know better to support and participate in, must be condemned with the strongest terms that are available for such condemnation. And may I use this program this afternoon, you, as we close,
Yes.
to let all those small-minded, evil-intended, diabolical plotters who believe that in their head they're going to remain in power for life, because when you are in power, you don't lose power. The writing is on the wall. They're going to continue to attack Claudette Singh in her capacity as chairman, and I believe all the good people of Guyana should put out good thoughts, prayers, words of encouragement to lend support to her, because they now know that it is with GCOM, and just like they would have done with the CCJ, the CARICOM leaders, every person who would have spoken, the international community, their pressure pot and their pressure point will be now on the chairman of GCOM, and we need to let her know you have made a statement at a time when you took office, you will follow the Constitution and the law, and all the democratic forces of Guyana stand with her to ensure that she obeys the and the law, to ensure that Guyana remains among the democratic nations of the world. This state of emergency nonsense must be debunked and must be rejected in every conversation, every place, everywhere, every time, because it just seems to be emboldened by comments that are coming from social media. So you must hear this afternoon that one of the candidates of the PVPC has said that nonsense will not happen. Our prime ministerial candidate, who's prime minister-elect, has already spoken to the security forces by saying to them they should not follow unlawful instructions. And that is very clear, because the more desperate he gets, why Lowenfield need bodyguards? If you do something right, it is an evil man that fleeth when no one is pursuing him. So says the scriptures. An evil man runs when nobody's even looking for him. That is why he needs all the bodyguards. That is why Roxanne Myers need all those bodyguards. But our prayers and good wishes are with the chairperson and the commissioners of GCOM to do what the Constitution mandates them to do. Thank you for this opportunity. And Sanjay and Vindhya, thank you for sharing this time with us.
Thank you, Hugh, and Bishop and Sanjeev.
Thank you very much. It was a very engaging afternoon. I think that Guyana is very much more at ease listening to you this afternoon. I think we brought a lot of content, and I think we are now looking forward to a declaration as soon as opportunity.
Thank you, Bishop. Thank you,
Thank you very much
Vindhya.
for joining us.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Brother Hugh, take good care.